Welcome back to Vault Hunters 118. This episode is going to be a bit different. A lot of you guys have been enjoying the stories I've been telling, and today I just don't have time to record a full episode. I was at jury summons for a long time, so today will be a story time episode where I will tell the greatest story I have to tell. In the meantime, we will run a vault together so you got something to look at as I regale you with the tale of Black Mountain. 'Twas 6 summers ago, in the land of New Mexico, in a place called Philmont, something I've spoken about before, a hiking ranch, a backpacking campsite ground for Boy Scouts and the like to enjoy. Difficult trails and long days hailed those who arrived at Philmont, and I was heralded with a welcome to hell by someone who had gone through the trail. You know the stories of that. You know the story of the terrible migraine I had that caused a lot of people to fear for me. But this truly is the greatest story I have to tell. This was all real. I will be omitting the names of the people involved, of course, because I don't want to, expose anyone's identity, but all of this actually happened to me and the people involved in this story. So, 'twas maybe 6 or 7 days in, I can't remember exactly, and my troop was going to go rock climbing. Now, I wasn't going rock climbing because I fear rock climbing, and I had been afraid for a great deal of this Philmont trip, and I decided I would take the time to relax, watch people climb around, maybe get hurt, have a good laugh about it. On the ascension to the rock climbing camp, the rock climbing facility, a staffer was walking down and asked us what we were doing. We explained the only thing we could possibly be doing in this area was rock climbing, and we were informed that due to incoming rain, we would be unable to rock climb. It really didn't look like it was going to rain, but they were the staff. We weren't going to argue with them. They were, there to keep us safe. It didn't rain that day, but we did receive the worst news of our lives up until that point. We just didn't realize it yet. We were told that our initial trail had flooded, and that we would have to take an alternate route across Black Mountain. Now, Black Mountain was well known to be the absolute most difficult trail that Philmont had to offer, and we were pretty surprised to actually hear that we needed to go around it, especially spoken in such a casual manner. But we figured that due to the general casual nature of the conversation we had, that perhaps Black Mountain had maybe been more of a fairy tale inflated by the scouts that had gone before, or at the very least, the trail was completely doable for a crew of our size and stature. As you can imagine, we were incorrect, but we'll get into that later. The night before, we spent a good long while hyping ourselves up and preparing ourselves mentally for what would be a vast physical challenge. Black Mountain is long. Black Mountain is steep. The average grade of the hike, so not at its steepest, not at its less steepest, whatever that word would be, is about 34%. Ooh, look at those. These like scarabs. Sorry to interrupt. These are like little scarabs. That's so cool. A grade of 34% is extremely steep. The maximum you can go is 90% before you're vertical. So we were well on our way. And that's a tough hike to do for even a crew of the most able-bodied people, let alone a bunch of 15-year-olds. This was very strenuous and very stressful. And I was in charge of the entire crew. So it mostly fell to me to just keep morality up, which was dropping quickly as we began the descent on the next day. Despite the hype talk that we'd had, it was just miserable. It was steep. It was painful. It was hot. The rain that we'd been threatened with was more of a teasing joke at this point. We welcomed anything that wasn't the horrible heat and the sweat and the steepness of Black Mountain. But no, we would not receive any. We need to prepare ourselves for false peaks, the small peaks on the way up a mountain, as no mountain is truly alone. We prepared for 3, as that's what we saw on the map. However, there were 5. And as you can imagine, the second time that you believe you should be at the end of your hike and you realize that you're not, that you have so many more miles left, is demoralizing like nothing else. We were in pain. We were, to a degree, we were suffering more than we should have been. It was hot, we were tired, thirsty, and hungry, and all we'd really been told was to bring a little extra water. Well, extra water was starting not to cut it, and I was really needing to not only hone in the crew, but hone in myself. I mean, you never want to be in charge of a sinking ship, and I was on the Titanic. Finally, after that 5th horrible false peak, we got more clear bearings of where we actually were, and we're confidently on the road to Black Mountain, on finally the pathway to Black Mountain. And as though the morality couldn't drop any further, or as though we couldn't be insulted anymore by our current situation, a staffer of Philmont came running by doing some Philmont challenge where the most able-bodied staff members prove their utter Greek godhood and run this difficult trek right past us, exhausted and tired. And some of us took that as a sign that anyone could do this and that we're only, you know, we're so close, and most of us took that as a sign that we suck. And not soon after, a little while passed, when the story truly turns into the most stressful day of my entire life, when one of the adult members collapsed. Fully collapsed on the road, sat down with this horrible, panicked look in his eyes, falling into the arms of one of the other adults in tears, unwell, extremely ill-looking, and I say this with absolute sincerity, I will never forget the expression on his face. You could see death reflecting in his eyes. This was a man who thought he was dying. I was very ill. No one exactly knew what was happening nor how to treat it. It could have been a heart attack. It could have been a stroke. It could have been simple exhaustion. But what we did know is that we were miles up. We were almost 10,000 feet up. We were miles into this horrible trek. And this man needed help that we could not give him. And this was a father of one of the members of the hike, a good personal friend of myself and my family. This was a very beloved member of our scout troop. This was terrifying. I don't think I've ever been in a situation that was more life-threatening to either myself or someone else. And it fell to me as the crew leader to go for help. I took two of the gentlemen there with me who were remotely calm. His son stayed behind with him, of course. And we began to trek past because we, according to the map, had perhaps maybe 30 minutes or so until we actually got into the easier downhill part where we could move much quicker and get to base camp and get help as fast as possible. We knew that time was not something we had on our side, and we were afraid. We were panicked. It was terrible. We had a horribly strenuous hike ahead of us, albeit one that was almost over, but still it had to be done in record time in order to potentially save the life of a father, friend, and scoutmaster. And as we rushed forward, maybe 20 or 30 minutes passed, we were still ascending, but down from the ascent came, like angels from the heavens, 2 rangers of Philmont who had just happened to be walking by. They were just doing a routine whatever, I don't know, a check on the trails or whatnot. They happened to walk by, and we practically fell to our knees and explained the situation. Thank God you're here. We're really afraid, or this has happened, or Scoutmaster says we need medical help. We need your help right now. And I will never, ever forget what they said to us. They said they were like, well, okay, we understand. We're here to help. We're going to help them. It's a good thing you found us here, because you're still 4 hours away from camp. At the time, we didn't even know if our adult leader had 4 hours of time left in him. It was this insane realization that there was a reality where it was 6 hours maybe if rangers were fast that any help could be received. But luckily we had these rangers. They were equipped with what they needed to help, and we were thankfully told that we could rest and have our lunch. And oh, 'twas the best lunch. I mean, this was victory. This was total victory. The lunch had stinger gummies inside of it, these delicious little fruit snack energy bits. So good. We were informed that help was on the way, and truly, despair turned into a hell of a victory. We were really celebrating, because we knew that at the very least we had only 4 hours left. It already had been 10 to 12 hours at this point during the day. It was hard. We were miserable, but we were almost done, and our scoutmaster was safe. Some time goes by, and rangers are presented to us. They're calling down from the trail, "Hey, we've got your water. We have your water." And these guys were Greek gods. They had like liters of water on their back that they just hauled, like Prometheus and the Flame. They hauled from the top of the mountain, from the base camp of Black Mountain, and they brought to us. They assisted in healing our scoutmaster, who thankfully was just suffering from the fact that he was an older gentleman. Later, we would actually learn that the Philmont camp almost dismissed him for his blood pressure. But the other adult leaders felt that he was physically fit enough. He'd served in the military. He was a very strong, stoic man who'd been training for this for a long time. And they felt that because Philmont said it would be okay, that this adult leader would be all right. And so the adults were quite afraid, knowing that this could have been very well a heart attack or a stroke. So it was a very fearful time, but we were thankful that he was okay. And it took time, and it was painful, and there was fear, but there was hope. We reached the top of Black Mountain, and what a magical place it was. They'd embedded a metal disc into the ground, into the top of Black Mountain. It was this placard. It's celebrating those who reached the top. And the counselors, the rangers there, they showed us around. They were very kind, very understanding to our situation. And I remember the ladybugs, of all things. There were maybe thousands of ladybugs, and they all lived at the top of Black Mountain. And they would live on each other. They clustered each other so much that I mistook them. This is real. I mistook them for strawberries. They created these like little fruit shapes on the trees and the leaves and the branches. It was beautiful. We had a friend at the time who had a very large afro that he just recently, I believe he picked it is the right term. And it was very full. It was very well groomed and taken care of. And the ladybugs, they mistook it for a bush, and they would hang out in his fro. And it was this moment of absolute triumph. And I wish it is where the story ends. But it is not. We were celebrating and cheering, and I remember the counselors, they pulled me aside and they said, "Okay, you're the crew leader, so we're going to tell you this first. But the good news is that it is downhill from here. The bad news is that it's downhill from here." And I was like, "I don't quite understand what you're saying. Downhill is easier than uphill. Everyone knows this." And he was like, "Yeah, it's 2 miles downhill, 2,000 feet of elevation change downhill." That is a significant 2,000 feet over 2 miles is a significant amount of elevation change. It wasn't vertical elevation change, but at the time, I was suffering from Osgood-Schlatters disease. It's a growing-related knee pain. And we had a weak scoutmaster. We had fearful people. And just in general, that's a lot of elevation change, no matter what direction you're walking in. It would be horrible, and it was. It was a horrible descent. It was so strenuous on knees. You'd constantly be afraid of slipping and falling as you moved. It was a miserable descent. There is a phenomenal picture, very famous amongst the friend group of the people who were at Black Mountain, at Philmont, of all of us sitting on a switchback, which is where a trail doubles back on itself, to more gradually ascend rather than be like a straight vertical, right? And the picture is literally our legs dangling off of the switchback. It was so steep. Us slumped in our giant backpacks, using them as harnesses to not fall off, and sleeping. We sat down for a minute, maybe two, and fell asleep. We were so physically exhausted at this point, and the hike wasn't over. This was one of the harder parts of the hike, because just morally we were destroyed. Emotionally, there was nothing, and physically, don't get me started on physically. Oh, horrible. It was so bad, so bad. But eventually, with the help of the Rangers, and with a good deal of time and pain and effort, we reached the Black Mountain Base Camp. And I wish I could tell you this was the end of the story, but no, the day kept going. It didn't stop. The first thing we noticed is that our access to a restroom, which you never really had restrooms at Philmont, they were just boxes with toilet seats made out of wood, and there was bees in them and whatever's horrible. But, you know, it's outdoors, you're not going to get plumbing, right? Ours was on a massive incline on top of this gravel, like, mound. It was so steep and it was so gravelly that you had to bring a walking stick to not slip and fall on your way to the restroom. And we watched people slip and fall on their... This is not like an exaggeration. People literally slipped and fell on their way to the restroom because they didn't have hiking equipment. It was like walking Black Mountain every single time you had to use the restroom. It was completely miserable. I mean, just a human rights violation, just essentially. It was depressing. It was a depressing campsite. It was this marshy, mucky, rivery campsite too. And by the time we got there, it was dinner time. As you can imagine, we'd hiked the entire day. The camp knew what was going on, which was good. They weren't really worried about how late we were because they understood the situation we were in and that we were okay. And I took one for the team. I said, hey guys, I'm changing up the dinner schedule. For one, I'll take the cooking shift tonight because I know today was horrible, and it was the leader's son was on cooking duty, and obviously I was not going to make him cook after that, and people were tired and hurt. So I took it, but I needed help. I said I needed help. And one of the other scouts, very helpful in the scouting community, saved my father's life. But that's a different story. He offered to help me cook. Both of us were exhausted, and we would eat. It was all freeze-dried food, right? All this dry, high sodium content stuff in a bag. You know the kind. You had to pour hot water into it to rehydrate it. It didn't taste good at the beginning, but once you started starving, day 5, it tasted pretty good. And we'd been saving the chicken spicy jambalaya rice for a special day, and I said, guys, today is the jambalaya day. And I gotta say, that raised the mood significantly. Everyone else agreed to get tents set up. They agreed to get the kitchen staff's tent set up, some of my stuff. There was a lot of camaraderie, and the guy and I start cooking, and we were exhausted. And we ruined it. Boiled too much water. He poured too much in. And if you've ever poured too much water when you're making instant ramen noodles, that's essentially what happened. Flavorless cardboard chalk was what our dinner was reduced to. Was what the meal we were looking forward to for a week was reduced to. And to make matters worse, I suggested to add sriracha sauce that we had picked up from another crew. They'd brought it with them. They didn't want it. It was just taking up space for them. So I had the great idea, I felt, to season it with sriracha sauce. It would not taste phenomenal, but it would have that spicy flavor that we'd been looking forward to. And right as we began to season it, as though the very world around us just could not let us have a win, it began to rain. It began to rain such that it washed the sriracha off of the food. And then we had soggy, wet, chalky cardboard rice. And that was what we had for dinner. We couldn't eat a different meal because we only had as much food as we needed for the trek. There's no extras. There's no extra provisions. There weren't extra provisions at camp. Food was stored in special locations. They only stored food in specific locations. It was very organized. So we had nothing but the tortillas we'd picked up off of a different crew and a bottle of syrup. And avert your eyes, children, because our dinner is what we called impromptu pancakes. We filled tortillas with syrup like they were burritos. We were like soot-covered kids in the coal mines. It was horrible. It was so horrible. It didn't taste good, but we tried to convince ourselves that no, this is pretty good. We can work with this. We really got to a point where we believed they tasted like real pancakes. And the Philmont area was bear country, and in bear country, when you go camping, you need to put your food up on stuff that's called bear bags or bear cans or whatever. There's a big old line that you hang between two trees, and you got to put them up there. And our line was too high for any of us to reach. And by any of us, I mean me and the kid who was the best thrower. I couldn't reach it as crew leader. He couldn't reach it as the best thrower. And basically reduced to tears, he and I, both of us, had to just like wake a counselor up and be like, we can't get the bear bags up. We need help. And they were like, hey man, it's okay. We'll help you. They were so kind. They were so good. And it was extreme. I mean, it was such an extreme day. Let's get a little personal. You guys want to get a little personal? You guys want to get a little personal here? All right. I'll say content warning, anxiety, and panic attack stuffs. So if that upsets you. But I am fortunate enough to not have a sort of nervousness and anxiety that causes panic attacks. I never have. I've dealt with them before. I've dealt with people who suffered from those very frequently, so I knew how to deal with them, but I never had them up to this point. And never did I believe that I would, considering my lack of that sort of nervousness disorder. Or I don't know the proper term for it, so you'll have to excuse me. But that night, after I laid down, after that day was done, my body was under such physical and emotional stress. I had a panic attack that stopped my breathing. Like, I hallucinated. It was horrible. I still remember I kept closing my eyes to sleep and believing that I had a ball and chain tied to me that was dragging me back to the mountain. It was a ferocious panic attack. I remember I woke people up because I would scream. It was so horrible. It was so bad. And at the time, it was the worst thing ever. But I've got to say, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, it's kind of a cool story to be able to tell because everyone's okay. There was no lasting medical effects that the adult leader suffered. I still hang out with him sometimes. Philmont itself, overall, Philmont had a lot of really cool stuff happen in it. You know, I want to be clear that I'm okay. Everyone involved is okay. It's an intense story, but it's such a good one, and I really do love to tell it because there's a lot of drama. And I'm, you know me, I'm a YouTuber. I'm into drama. I like yeah, and I want to be clear. My words are obviously dramatic. I like to embellish my words to really give you a clear understanding of what it was like. But nothing that I said was over-exaggerated or untrue in any way, shape, or form. The death we thought may have been on the line, the timing, I've tried to be as accurate as possible. It was a long time ago. And I suppose to really cue in how significant of this event was, not only had I never had a panic attack up to that point, but I haven't had one since then, except for one instance. And that has to do, it was actually the COVID vaccine. I have a terrible fear of needles and vaccinations, and the COVID vaccine was really hyped up. So And that was a minor one considered. So yeah, look at that. The perfect, it's a perfect vault story. It took a whole vault to tell. That's why I couldn't tell last episode. I really do hope you stuck around to this point. This is an important story to me, and I love sharing my stories with you guys. And if you like this format, and if it does, well, but if you like this format, let me know. I have more stories I could tell, less life-threatening and terrible ones, of course. But I've plenty of stories about my life, about Boy Scouts, about things that I know, and I love doing storytelling. So let me know in the comments. If you enjoy this format, if you want more of it, let me know if you want less of it. If you don't like this, if you're like, dude, get it out of here, tell me. I want to know. I want to know. I'm going to leave the vault so I don't frighten you guys. Don't worry. See, we're exiting. But if you made it this far from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. I really love telling this story. I like being personal and open with you guys. And you know what? I don't usually do this, but if you enjoyed, subscribe. It'd mean the world to me. Yeah, I know I normally do like a cold exit or anything, but I think today deserves a regular... Nah, just kidding. Relic time. Wait. Is that...